Hey friends, what's up? Philip here with Points of Philip, and I'm actually here because there's an exciting news that, well, I really wanted to talk to you about. So we're going to talk about everything you need to know about the new transfer partners with Capital One and why they might be important to you. All right, so let's get into that. But before we do, I'm going to ask you guys to like and subscribe. Doing that helps me to know that what I'm doing is helpful, and it also helps YouTube know that people are enjoying the content. So that actually helps more people to view the content. So I really appreciate any help you send me that way. All right, let's get into Capital One's transfer partners now and take a look at what some of the fun things are. So the new ones here are Japan Airlines, and this is actually at a higher special offer rate until 10/22. So it's 1,000 Capital One miles to 975 JAL miles, and it's normally going to be 750. So right now, if you do have Capital One miles and you're definitely flying to Japan, I would recommend thinking about that. All right, let's take a look here at Qatar. So Qatar Airways is here. That's 1,000 Capital One miles is 1,000 Avios, and so that is Qatar Avios. So that's pretty nice. Now there's so this actually is not really a direct new one, right? Because you could always transfer Avios to Avios, but it's nice to have direct. And then I prefer is a new hotel program. Now this is 1,000 Capital One miles to 2,000 per I prefer points. However, it's important to note that Citi transfers at 1 Citi point to 4 I prefer points. So if you are booking I prefer, would probably recommend you using Citi points instead. But if you don't have Citi points, then there might still be some options here. We'll take a look at that. All right, then we're also going to talk about Virgin Atlantic because this actually has a higher point offer right now up until October 1st. And so basically this is 1,000 to 1,300 Virgin points. So the reason why I only have, I only actually have 600 Virgin miles because I cleared everything out and did a transfer to Virgin Atlantic because, well, I know my wife and I are traveling to England sometime next year. And, well, we're probably definitely going to use Virgin Atlantic. So that extra 6,000 miles that I use for that transfer is solid. So very happy about that development. All right, let's get into now kind of what's going on with Capital One. So Capital One, basically, essentially, the venture miles are important because you earn them with the venture card family. So the venture one has no annual fee, earns 1.25 points per dollar spent. And then you have the Venture card, which is $95, and that has 2 points per dollar spent. And then you have the Venture X, which is kind of the big daddy with the lounge access. That's $395, but you get $300 in, essentially travel credit through the Capital One travel portal, which is nice. And that gets 2 points per dollar as well. However, if you want to kind of have a Capital One system, you definitely can. So you have the catch-all there and your premium travel card if you go with the Venture X. But if you're looking for something that helps you earn more with food or even entertainment, then the Saver card can actually help you out. If you have the Saver card and the Venture or the Venture X, you're pretty much set for life because with the Saver card, although it has no annual fee, it earns in cash back. It earns 3% on dining, on groceries, and on entertainment, as well as some select streaming services. And so you can actually earn higher multipliers and a lot of important spend. Now, although it's cash back, you can actually transfer that cash back to your venture card actually, so that 1 cent cash back can convert to 1 venture mile. And so at that point, then you can actually transfer those points out to, well, any of these transfer partners that are on this list, not just the 4 that we talked about today. And so that's really nice. So you can actually use Capital One as a pretty coherent system and actually make decent points with it, which is really solid and really important. All right. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into another way that you can actually earn Capital One miles as well. So if you do have a venture card in your account, you do have access to Capital One offers. Now, Capital One offers is a kind of a mixture between American Express and Rakuten. So Capital One offers are nice. You can actually get pretty high offers sometimes, but you actually have to click into it on either the Capital One app or the Capital One website. And then you have to click into it, use your shopping through that. After you clicking through that link, you have to turn off any others, so like Capital One Shopping or Rakuten. If you turn those on, it will actually interrupt your shopping trip and you won't get your points. But then you can also, so like a lot of these things are like if you go to Costco, sometimes that gets 12x back. So for every dollar you spend at Costco, you get 12 venture miles back. And so I've used that as a really great way to enhance my Capital One miles kind of product, back end, right? So that's really solid. But what I want to do now is I actually want to take a look at some of these amazing opportunities that we see. All right, so Japan Airlines, first of all, is really helpful when you're trying to go fly into Japan from the United States. So I'm going to go to the frequentmiler.com. Nick actually did a really great article about this, and so I decided that I was going to just talk about it here since he did all of the hard work. So the important things to note is that if you do transfer to Japan Airlines, first of all, you have to have your account open for at least a week in order to actually make redemption. So that's sad. That's important. And then there's also a 36-month hard expiration policy on those points. And so that's going to be really, really important to note. Now, here's the great thing is that you can actually get a lot of business availability for 80,000 points and $214 per passenger in taxes and fees. And so ostensibly the cheapest one is actually as low as 55,000 miles, but essentially 55,000 to 80,000 points for a business class seat from the United States to Japan is kind of insane. It's a great price. It's really solid. You can find first availability for about 125,000 points as well. And so now that's per person, right? So that's important to note. But it's actually really, really nice. So that's really nice too. And then economy class between Japan and the United States for 27,000 miles. Now, if you're actually interested in taking a look at a kind of a weird partner award, so Air France, you can actually book through Japan Airlines without surcharges. So this is really interesting. So let's take a look here. They found availability on business from Air France from Orlando to Paris for just 60,000 Japan Airlines mileage bank miles and just $5.60 in taxes and fees. Now, if you can find that same award availability on Air France's website, you're looking at 60,000 points, but you're also looking at about $250 in taxes and fees per person per way. And so if you're actually trying to just avoid that, you can actually, if you have a program like a transferable credit currency program where you can transfer either into Air France or in Japan Airlines like Capital One, then you can actually, instead of transferring that to Air France, you can actually transfer it to Japan Airlines, go to Paris, and then actually save about $250 per person. So that is really solid as well. So Japan Airlines has some sweet spots, primarily if you're going to Japan, but also if you're going to other countries, there might be some sweet spots as well with some of those partners. Okay, so now let's take a look at Qatar or Qatar, however you pronounce it. I'm sure I'll be corrected either way. But let's take a look here at this. Now I'm looking at Seats.aero. So this is just the free version of Seats.aero. So we're looking at 2 months out. And we're looking at availability specifically with Qatar Airways Privilege Club. And so I'm showing flights from North America to anywhere. So let's take a look here. If we were to just do Europe, let's take a look here. So we can do, let's see, we got San Diego to Heathrow for 35,000 points on economy. So that's not bad, really. When you're thinking about international economy, 35,000 points, not bad. Now, it's not good because for that same flight, you could probably do it for 6 to 10,000 Virgin Atlantic points. But then again, you'll also be paying probably a lot more on actual like fees and taxes and things like that. We're showing 100,000 points for business, or for first actually. So that's really nice as well. That's British Airways. So that's not bad. So 100,000 points for business or for 100,000 points for first on British Airways. And that's 4 seats. So that's actually not bad at all either. Let's continue to see, though. It looks like there's one here that's British Airways again. That's 2 seats direct for 80,000. And that's Dulles to Heathrow So that's a solid flight, and that's 30,000 points in economy, 90,000 points in business, and then 80,000 points in first class. So the Seats.aero actually really helping us out here. Now, we actually just saw this one open up, Charlotte Douglas to Dublin for 62,000 points on American Airlines. So American Airlines, this is business class. So that actually is really, really solid as well. So right now, the only airline that actually allows you to, convert into American Airlines is Citibank. And so Citibank allows you to convert 1-to-1 to American, which is nice. But this actually can really help you be able to use other credit card points like Capital One and be able to actually fly on that at American Airlines business class product straight into Dublin. So if you are traveling into Dublin, then that's going to be a really solid option for you. All right, so let's take a look here at some other options. So we're seeing not a whole lot anything cheaper than that. There's one for 90,000, and that's from Chicago to Heathrow, and that's on AA or BA. So there's a couple different availabilities. All right, let's take a look here now at into Asia. Let's see if there's any availability here. All right, so we're looking at 70,000 seats for business. Now, there's only one seat available, but it's from San Francisco to Doha. So that's a nice long flight, and you definitely want to be in business. 70,000 points for this one as well. 140,000 seats here from Miami to Doha. And let's see. So, yeah, so we're seeing some decent options. Let's take a look at. Yeah, let's take a look at anywhere. So we're also seeing that if we want to fly from, yeah, okay, so we've already seen that. Now we're seeing here from San Francisco to Boston, we can travel in for 16,000 points. We can fly directly in economy, and so that's is nice. It's yeah, so that's actually a really solid option as well. Same thing here. So we have Lima and then Miami. So that is 38,000 in business on American Airlines. That's also really not bad. So there's a lot of availability here. So this is from San Diego to Philadelphia, 43,000 points in business. This might actually just be premium economy or, kind of the comfort plus kind of thing. Not entirely sure about that. But 25,000 points for Chicago to Naples in economy. So that's not bad either. So Qatar can have some solid availability there. Next, I want to go into I Prefer. So I Prefer actually has some interesting options. And we're going to say specifically in the United States. So we're going to take a look at View All Destinations. All right, so we got Ireland, 7 properties in Ireland, 9 properties in Rome. We have a bunch of properties in New York. Okay, so let's take a look. So Rose and Shingle Creek is actually in my backyard. And let's take a look. So rates from US dollar, $103. Rose and Shingle Creek is a massive property. It's never actually very expensive because it's kind of out there. It is definitely off of Universal Boulevard, but it's on kind of like the far end of Universal Boulevard. So that's not the best thing. But let's take a look here at Orlando hotels. So we're going to look at Orlando, Florida. There's 6 hotels in Orlando, so we should have some options. Let's give ourselves, let's say we're looking for Valentine's Day weekend. Let's see what we can do there. Search. Okay, so we're seeing the Rose and Shingle Creek, the Rose and Plaza Hotel, which is actually a little bit nicer, the Rose and Center Hotel, the Visions Resort and Spa, Edda Hotel in Orlando, the Alfond Inn in Winter Park. That's actually very expensive usually, and it looks like that's what we're looking at. So we're looking at $252 US dollar night. Now let's say if we were looking at points. So we're looking at 50,000 points. So that's not the best. Let's go ahead and pick out our calculator though. All right, let's take a look here at our calculator. So we're going to do 50,000 points. Actually, no, we're going to do, what was it, 102, 252? $252 divided by 50,000 points times 100. All right, so 50 cents per point. So essentially, basically, what you're doing by turning that Capital One point into two I prefer points, then you're not doing so hot now. And that's again one of the reasons why we're talking about city, because at that point, those city points become possibly 2 cents per point, and that can be actually a lot more interesting than doing your Capital One miles. Now, interestingly enough, the Capital One points here are actually about the same value as they would be if you did to the Accor Live Limitless program. So the Accor Live Limitless program, you get you get two Capital One miles go into one Accor point, and that Accor point is worth 2 euro cents towards a booking. And so essentially, basically, what it works out to is each Capital One point, when it transferred to Accor, is roughly 1 US cent per point. And so basically the transfer partner from Accor is very similar to I Prefer. And so if you're going to be using any of these hotel programs, you're essentially turning your Capital One miles to 1 cent per point, which at that rate, you might as well just keep it on the saver card, cash it out as cash, and then pay for that hotel stay directly, because then you can actually earn points on that stay. And so that's kind of a consideration. So we see a lot going on. There are definitely some winners more than some of the other losers. And so that's definitely a consideration. But anyway, thanks so much for joining me. And I can't wait to see you guys until next time. Bye.